ADB recently downgrading their full-year growth forecast for developing Asia, right? What drove the cut?
Well, we only downgraded the projections very slightly, and it just was recognizing some slower demand in China and elsewhere. But we still expect growth next year, or this year, 2022, Happy New Year, to be 5.3% in the region, which we think is a healthy, resilient recovery in Asia.
It takes a little bit of time to get used to being this year for 2022, doesn't it? But time flies, and in the meantime, we had seen China being, the beacon of hope in the beginning of the pandemic, and they had such a strong recovery. Now that's starting to fizzle out, and you're just pointing out that that's one of the reasons that you had to downgrade your growth forecast for Asia. So tell us what's going to happen with China this year, and are we going to see the stimulus that many people are expecting right now, and what will be the broader implications for the rest of the region?
Well, it looks like the Chinese government plans to be accommodative, relaxing reserve requirements and interest rates. There was an adjustment recently. So I think the policymakers and the central bank will, I think, ensure that the economy kind of keeps steady progress, even though it's facing some headwinds, especially with the recent upsurge in cases and a zero COVID policy, which is can really force lockdowns. We saw the city of Xi'an, for instance, be completely shut down recently. And if that spreads to other parts of China and results in more widespread lockdowns, that could be an issue. But if it's controlled, I think, and given the leverage that of the policy levers the government has, I think we still expect Chinese growth to be on par with the region at 5.3% in 2022.
Is potentially a relaxation of that zero COVID policy one of the most important levers the policymakers in China can pull if they're looking to stimulate things?
I think so. I mean, not just China, but I think broadly in the region and the world, countries need to start looking through the pandemic and thinking about how we get to a new normal where we can manage issues related to COVID. And of course, increasing vaccination is the key to a back to normal strategy. And at the ADB, we're very focused on relieving both the supply constraints, helping countries get access to vaccines, but also trying to think about ways to convince hesitant people to get vaccinated.
As we've got inflation rising in parts of the world, how do you see this impacting some of the poorest and more marginalized populations in Asia?
Well, our forecasts for Asia are that inflation will remain modest. Our projection for 2022 is 2.7% inflation. It's been a bit less than in more developed regions of the world. And part of that is that Asia broadly has suffered less from supply bottlenecks in recent times. But also, there's been pretty sound macroeconomic management among many of the countries in the region. The long-term growth rate in the past decade has been about 3.2%. So we're still below what is typical in terms of our projections for the year.
Does that mean that the poorest and most vulnerable will not be hit as hard as perhaps in other parts of the world, given the price pressures haven't been as sharp over there?
Well, to some extent, yes, but of course, the poor consume a very specific bundle of goods. So to the extent that in some economies, food prices we have seen go up higher, that's very important for the poor. It's certainly something we need to keep an eye on. And more broadly, despite our optimistic prognosis, relatively optimistic, we do recognize that the poor have really borne the brunt of the shocks caused by the pandemic and have suffered in a number of respects in terms of losing jobs, in terms of children being out of school and not having access to technology. So we really think it's important for countries in the region to also start to really address these problems. It's going to be really important for the intermediate term and to address the issue of inequality. And of course, we at the ADB are really focused on the poverty reduction goals.
Albert, 2021, of course, was not just about the inequality within countries, but also inequality between regions, right? I mean, that uneven recovery that we've seen with perhaps North Asia doing better because of their tech exports, Southeast Asia not doing that well. We have seen a little bit more optimism that perhaps Southeast Asia will start catching up this year. Will that be the case?
Well, our projections are that South Asia, led by India, will have the highest growth rates in 2022, but it's because they suffered kind of the biggest shock in 2000. Growth across the region will be moderate. Southeast Asia, we project to grow by 5.1%, Central Asia 4.4%. And I think it's still going to put them behind where they would have been, without the pandemic. But I think the prognosis is good.
Yeah, let's just have a look at that Central Asian number. That's one of the few regions where there is a dramatic increase for the growth forecast. Is that because of a base effect, or is there something else going on here?
In Central Asia, I think, it's been a little bit less hit by the pandemic, and given the broader increases in demand in the region, I think we've upgraded it slightly. But that's so I think we are optimistic. Those growth rates are still a little bit below the regional average, though.